So the idea that like, well, you don't know who you are at 23, but at 30, you're going to know who you are. No, you're not. Right. At 30,
No.
you're going to know who you are at 30. And at 40, you're going to know who you are at 40. And when you choose a person to marry, no matter how old you are, the thing you're saying to them, because there's a reason you make vows. There's a reason that marriage isn't just like, oh, I love you and I'm going to stay with you as long as I love you. No. Wall Street Journal has an article that's going to be important to neither of us, but it might be important to our kids, my actual kids, your potential kids. So the title of this is Too Risky to Wed in Your 20s, Not If You Avoid Cohabiting First. For anybody who doesn't know, cohabiting is living with your romantic partner. So research shows that marrying young without ever having lived together with a partner makes for some of the lowest divorce rates. Right now, the median age for marriage is 29 for women and 30 for men, and it's higher for people with a college degree. So people are definitely waiting longer. There's not a lot of people doing what I did, which is to get married at 23 and divorced at 29. I don't think that I didn't get divorced because I was too young when I got married. I got divorced because I married the wrong person. But being older, I don't think being older would have prevented me from marrying the wrong person. I think I probably would have made a similar decision 5 years later. And waiting till I was 30 wasn't really an option, because if you wait till you're 30 to get married, you're going to be having your first child at 32. And I wanted to have 3 or 4 kids. So first kid at 32, last kid at 38. You're 60 when your youngest one graduates from college. Ironically, that's the situation I'm going to be in because my youngest one was born when I was 38. But if everything had gone according to plan, my youngest would have been born when I was 30. And so, graduating from college, I'm in the last one is out of the house. I'm in my early 50s, ready to go on and do stuff. Good thing I love having my kids around. So I'm not worried about having a kid in the house when I'm in my late 50s, early 60s. It's going to be fine.
I've always been the one who is firmly in the fact that you should live together before you get married. I never understood the logic behind it. When I did have a chance to kind of read through this, it brought up some interesting points. One, I would probably ask you, as a guy who has been married and divorced, did you and your significant other at the time live together before you got married?
We did not.
Okay, because I know when I was reading through this, they said that people who do live together had an interesting point where they said that if they've lived together with a previous partner, whether boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, whatever, that they were more inclined to be able to head for the exit if things got tough.
Right. Well, and if you
And
live together before you get married and you break up, the next relationship, you have an idea of what should lead to the breakup of your relationship. In my opinion, if you get married, nothing short of violence or infidelity should lead to the end of your relationship. Anything else you should be able to work through. Infidelity, some people can work through and some people can't. When you live together, you live together unmarried, your relationship is about your love for each other. But when you get married, your relationship is about your commitment to each other, and commitment should outlive love, right? So when you love somebody, and especially when you're talking about like in love, there's a psychological term, if I'm remembering it correctly, it's limerence. It's like the emotional feeling of love, the kind of thing that you get in romantic comedies and shit. That's kind of what people rely on when they're living together unmarried. And when that fades, people think, oh, I'm in the wrong relationship, now it's time to break up. Or when that fades and things get contemptuous and difficult, they move on. But when you're married, it's about a commitment. And so when that feeling goes away due to stress or two people growing in different paths, you're committed to each other. And so you do work to get that back, right? Because you can get that back. You can grow back together. You can learn to love the person that your spouse has grown into, because you're married for 30 years, right? The 55-year-old version of you is not the 25-year-old version of you. You're different and your spouse is different, and you have to learn to love each other at each stage of your life. But if you're living together before you get married, there's going to be conflict in there. At some point, you're going to be different people who don't understand each other, and you're going to be like, oh, well, I guess this is the time when we break up. And if you take that idea of when you break up into a marriage, then you're going to hit that point. It's going to happen, right? Nobody goes 40 years, 50 years in a relationship without reaching that point where you just don't understand the person your spouse has grown into and they don't understand you.
Well, with our age old saying that people always change too.
Hmm.
So just because when you start dating somebody doesn't mean that they're always going to necessarily be the same person. It's part of life where you evolve and you become the next stage of you. At 23, 24 years old, you're not necessarily going to know what that is. I
I
think a
mean,
lot of people would tell you at 23, 24 years old, and then you talk to them 10 years later, kids or no kids. For me, for example, 36 now. At 23, 24, would I say I am the same individual as I was then? No. My liver can't handle it like it did at 23, 24. That's the biggest difference. But you grow up, you get older. 36, am I going to be the same that I'm going to be, say, when I hit 55? Probably not.
no,
Just
definitely not.
it's going to be. I mean, I've never been married, so I can't sit here and say that I definitively can agree with a lot of this things. A lot of it does make sense because you are
Mhm.
building something. You don't have previous relationships. I've lived with partners, so it's not something that I'm gonna necessarily look for the exit. But I guess it all comes down to it's all about finding that right person that's gonna
I'm not,
make you
see,
wanna push yourself.
I got to disagree on that because we're talking about how people change. The argument for waiting until you're older is that when you're 23, you don't know who you are, you don't know what you want to do with your life. And so you
Mhm.
wait until you're like 30, 32, and then you know who you are and what you want to be with your life until you're 40 and you suddenly know who you are and what you want to do with your life until you're 50, because it's going to happen over and over. When I was 20, I had an idea of what my life was going to be. All right, when I was 20 years old, I was going to be a youth minister, and I was going to be just the best, most dedicated youth minister ever. And I didn't care about money, and I didn't care about recognition, I didn't care about any of that stuff, and I just wanted to be a youth minister and have some kids and enjoy my poor life. When I was 30, I was going to be a teacher. I was going to teach high school math, right? And like I cared a little bit more about money because I was divorced at that point, and so money was more of an issue because I was going to have to pay child support and I was going to have to meet somebody. But I was going to do this thing. I was going to kind of get more involved with the community and going to teach. And at 20, I was very outgoing, open book, social person. And at 30, I was a very introverted, kept my emotions and my thoughts close to my chest. And I did not express myself or engage with people. And by 35, I was a completely different person. And at 40, I'm a completely different person. I've been changing drastically every 5 years. So the idea that, like, well, you don't know who you are at 23, but at 30, you're going to know who you are. No, you're not. Right. At 30,
No.
you're going to know who you are at 30. And at 40, you're going to know who you are at 40. And when you choose a person to marry, no matter how old you are, the thing you're saying to them, because there's a reason you make vows. There's a reason that marriage isn't just like, oh, I love you and I'm going to stay with you as long as I love you. No, marriage is, I vow to stay with you and stay faithful to you and to cherish you for the rest of my life. And what that means is, I vow that the next person I am will be committed to and care for the next person you are, and the person after that, and the person after that, because you have to make that choice every day. You make a choice to love that other person. Every day you make a choice to respect that other person. The feeling of love isn't the important thing, it's the respect for the other person. And if you respect the other person, you will go beyond, above and beyond, to treat them well, to care for them, and that leads to a good relationship, right? That leads to a good marriage. Contempt for that other person is a thing that kills a relationship. And so you kind of live in this, you commit to respect and not contempt to that other person, not have contempt for that other person, but not to love them and not to know yourself perfectly and know what you're going to want, not to know them perfectly and know what they're going to want, but just to continue deciding to honor your commitment.
But it does help to find that person or the one, if you want to call it for lack of a better term. I'm not saying it's the only thing, however. There's a lot more components that go into it. Somebody who you might think is the one initially might not end up being the one. They just might have been that one,
I mean,
the January one.
there is no one though. This is what I'm saying. There is no one. You make a choice. You choose a person. Say, I like this person. I think they're a
But at
good
the same
person. I think they're
point,
going to be a good person, and I commit to this person. Right?
yeah,
They're
but
not
at the
the
same
one.
point,
There
if
is
you're
no one.
But at the same point, couldn't you make the argument that that is the one because that's exactly what you're doing? You are choosing that one person.
Right. Okay. So, but I'm not looking for the one. I am committing to one. Right. At any given time, if you are reasonably able, socially engaging person, got reasonable intelligence, you have decent prospects for your future, whatever. There are a few women that would be a good social match for you, right? You get along well, you'd be attracted to each other, you know, like your families are compatible, whatever.
Yeah.
All right, let's say there's three of them and they all have different qualities about them, but all of them would be exactly as good a match. And like God is telling you, like, whichever one of these women you pick, your relationship can work and be great. How do you
Well, yeah,
decide?
see, will work and can work
Yeah,
are 2
and
very
because
different.
it takes a lot, because the point I was trying to make is that
Yeah.
you choose somebody and then you have to commit.
Oh,
You
you do.
both have to
You
commit
do.
to doing that, because if you don't both commit to doing that, then it's not going to work even if they are the one.
Well, but even though it's part of the one, you still have to do work because even if you found the one, there's still going to be rough times ahead of you. It's not going to be all sunshine and roses. But if you're hoping that person is the one, that you're going to want to put that effort in. You're going to want to get through the hard times. You're not going to look at it and just say, "Hey, there's the door. This is too hard. I can find another the one." That's the
Okay, but what
person
about when you don't want to?
that was never the one.
How long is your longest relationship?
3.5 years.
3.5 years. All right. This is my second relationship that's gone 7 years. Both times there have been months where one or both of us did not want to respect the other person, did not want to
Oh
commit
yeah.
to the other person, did not want to make it better, did not want to stay in it. Now, me, I committed. Even when I didn't want to, I did what was necessary to do it. And by choosing to respect and honor my commitment, my mind works through its difficulties, right? I can get through my emotional issues and I can come back on the other side where now I do want to, right? I didn't want to when I worked through that thing by being faithful to my commitment, and now I want to. Now, in one case, she decided she didn't want to, right? She was unwilling to work through that commitment. And to me, that is dishonorable. You broke your commitment because your commitment was not to love, your commitment was not to desire, your commitment was to action, right? And when you break your commitment, that's dishonorable. In the other case, she chose that she did want to, right? She continued to work through, and we've come out difficult times, right? You're in a relationship for 7 years. Difficult things happen. You go through periods where you don't like each other, you don't want to be together, you fight, and if you are committed to it, then you move forward, right? And you come out on the other side, and now you have that love and respect again, because again, you're new people, and the new me understands and respects the new her, and the new her understands and respects the new me, and we have a brand new relationship. The idea that you're going to want, if it's the right person, you're going to want to do these things, I don't think that's true. I think eventually you're going to hit a point where it's outside influences or outside influences where you don't want to, and to maintain your own integrity, you have to commit to doing that thing.
Oh, but I'm not saying that you won't want to. You aren't going to have times. Like, even though longest type of relationship I've been in 3.5 years doesn't mean I haven't gotten to the point where I don't want to. The
But when
principle
you didn't want
behind
to,
it,
did you
though,
break up?
is in those situations, not always. Not always. I had you for a second. They thought I was going to say, yeah. Not always. But the point, what I'm saying is when you find that one, you're right. There are going to be days where you're going to be like, I don't want to even talk to you. I don't want to even look at you. And you're going to feel the same way. The, the whole concept behind the one is you're going to push through those times. And while today might not be sunshine and rainbows, because that's my new go-to saying,
Can you say
it
rainbows
might
and
be a
butterflies?
cloudy
Because I
day.
got Maroon 5 rolling in my head right
I can do rainbows and butterflies for you. Some days are going to be cloudy, some days are going to be bad, but you have to remember what's ahead, and you have to sometimes dig in on the days you don't want to.
now.
It's part of being adult, it's part of being in love, it's part of maintaining those vows. Now there are times, while we're talking on the topic of marriage there and divorce, sometimes there are times, and you as a divorced man could probably attest to that, you do need to walk away, and it
Like I
is
said, there are two times. Those two times are infidelity and violence. Like, to me, there's no other. I could not maintain my integrity, even when my wife, ex-wife, was. We were in a therapy session. She was just straight insulting me and mocking me and talking about how she's going to file for divorce. And I had my individual session with our therapist after that, and she's like, "So this is where you stand. And I was like, I'm not filing for divorce. If I file for the divorce, that is my integrity going. Now, I got fucked because of that decision, and I don't feel bad about it. To me, my integrity was on the line, and I maintained my integrity, and that's a hell of a lot more important to me.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes it's like you said, it's infidelity and violence, but sometimes what do we define that violence as? Like, is it
Hitting
always going to
somebody,
be physical?
stabbing somebody,
What about
actual
mental violence?
violence, huh?
Yeah, what about mental violence?
I don't think that's violence.
There is such thing as mental abuse as an issue to walk away from something. But there is, think about it, in a toxic relationship like that, if you're always being put down, you're always being treated like property and not a person, kind of where does the line draw? Do you have, does it take them having to physically, you can hurt somebody without putting your hands on them.
I mean, that's true. That's true.
So it
So
kind of,
I don't know. I'd have to know, and I don't think this is the right moment to get into like what you mean by being treated like property instead of
oh
a
yeah,
person, and like to be put down. Like if we're talking about like being put down and um like being put down, being mocked, belittled, been there. I don't think that is cause. It's bad, right? That's very bad. But I think that's cause for a lot of actions. But I don't think I would feel justified in ending a marriage over it.
but what happens if one side, the side that's caught doing the belittling, the mocking, the insulting,
Hmm.
what if they're never willing to change? At a certain point, I understand and respect integrity, but do you stay and just take the abuse in that situation?
I don't know. I'd have to think
Or do
about that
you,
a whole lot longer.
yeah. Oh yeah. It's
Because
a
I'd have
lot
to,
to think
because I
about.
mean, to me, when I was single, I would talk to people about, relationships they were in, whether or not they wanted to get married. And the thing I would always tell people is like, look, when you're getting married, this is not a commitment to love somebody. This is a commitment that when you don't love them, you won't leave them. That when you don't love them, you'll respect them. That when you don't love them, you'll treat them as a person and equal partner. Like that's the commitment you make when you get married. If you're not willing to honor that commitment, don't get married. Um,
Well,
and if you're
it's not just about leaving them. It's about helping them be the best versions of
well, I
yourself,
mean, and I said
right?
that like
Helping them.
you'll
Yeah.
respect
Okay.
them, right? When you don't want to,
Yeah.
when
Okay.
you don't love them, you'll respect them. When you don't love them, you'll
Yeah.
treat them like a person, right? It's a lot more than not leaving them, and that's the commitment
Oh
that
yeah.
each person has to make. And honestly, like I don't know. I don't know. In my opinion, like there were three ways my first marriage could have gone. One, I could have stayed married to the unpleasant woman I was married to at the time. I
That's the
could
PG
have
version, right?
She could have chosen to change and our relationship would have been restored, or she could leave. And I feel like the most likely one to be good for me was her leaving, right? Her deciding to change was pretty unlikely, and us staying in that relationship would have been horrific. So I think, yeah, in ways I dodged a bullet. But even then, like there's a religious aspect of this to me too, where there is value outside of my own enjoyment of the marriage, to me honoring my commitment. And I know that doesn't stand for everybody, but that is a big part, a big unspoken part of what I had said before about honoring my commitment. But yeah, I mean, in a situation of kind of emotional abuse, because the hard thing about emotional abuse is the abused person, in order to be emotionally abused as an adult, you have to allow it to happen. As a kid, it happens to you. You're a kid. You can't stop that. But as an adult, you have to allow it to happen. And it took me a long time to understand that. But that, as an adult, you can stop people from emotionally abusing you without abandoning that person, right? You can be in a relationship with somebody who is attempting to emotionally abuse you without actually getting emotionally abused. Now, physical abuse is different, right? Physical abuse is somebody like restraining your freedom and forcing something on you. But emotional abuse is somebody saying mean things to you, and you can let that bother you or you cannot. And I'm not saying that's easy to not let it bother you. I'm just,
Oh yeah.
it is a thing. You have power in that situation. Whereas if somebody's physically stronger than you and they dominate you, you don't have power in that situation. And that's why I think it's different between the two. After talking about the idea that that if you've lived with somebody previously, you would either be comparing them, comparing your spouse to this previous partner, or you would have a different idea of what necessitates you leaving the relationship. She says another theory was articulated by a newly married 20 something couple, Joey and Samantha Paris, who live in Dallas. They met in New York City and surprised their peers by getting married at age 24 without first living together. From Joey's vantage point, cohabitation often made his friends and fiance more, or friends in finance, more jaded about their relationship after they married. I think that part of the allure of marriage has lost its luster because, in their eyes, they can get all the benefits of marriage outside of marriage, he said. Joey remembers asking one friend who cohabited before marriage, "How's it feel now?" And he said, "I'll be honest, not that different." He's like, "I don't get what the hype is about marriage." And I think that, like, that is one of the reasons that the first time I got married, I did not want to live with my fiance. Is that marriage is supposed to be a two people forming a new life, and if you already live together, you've already merged all your finances, you already have, everything laid out. You're not starting a new life, and so you carry in all of these other ideas and behaviors and everything from your old life into your new life, and it can trip you up.
Is it a new life if you move in together and you're bringing all those things in, or is it just a new experience in life?
Well, I'd been living with my wife
I guess
for
that's kind of
5
how
years
it.
before we got married, and um, there was no difference when we got home from the wedding. When we got home from the honeymoon, it was just exactly the same.
Except you had a guy living upstairs.
I mean, he was already living there though. He
Yep.
was there before. He was there when we left. He was there when we got back. Nothing changed except we filed joint taxes now.
Eh,
Yay!